Do me a favour and pass me my
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Wokingham Borough Council's Executive. I'm Stephen Conway. I'm the leader of the Council and Executive Member for Housing, Partnerships and the Local Plan, and I'll be chairing the meeting. Just a few housekeeping points before we begin. Please ensure any mobile phones or other devices are switched off. If you're participating via Teams, when you're not speaking, please mute your microphone. Please also note that the meeting is currently being webcast live, and I'm not aware of any planned fire drills this evening, so if the fire alarm does sound, it's genuine, and please leave the building via the nearest exit and gather in Muster Point 2, which is located in the car park at the rear of the building over there. I'm going to start by introducing the officers who are present here this evening. And maybe I should start online. We have Emma Cockrell, who's the Director of Children's Services. And we have Sally Watkin, who is the Director of Corporate Community and Change. And then in the room, we have Matt Pope as the Executive Director of Children's, Adults and Public Health. And next to Matt, we have George Framalico, who's the Director of Place and Growth. And then there's a little gap, and we get to the back table, and there's Priya Patel, who's the Head of Democratic and Electoral Services. And next to Priya is Andrew Moulton, who's the Assistant Director of Governance and the Council's Monitoring Officer. And next to Andrew is Susan Parsonage, who's the Chief Executive. And next to Susan is Graham Ebers, who's the Deputy Chief Executive and also the Chief Finance Officer. Now I'm going to ask the councillors to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Adrian this time.
My name is Adrian Betteridge. I'm the Executive Councillor for Active Travel, Transport and Highways.
I'm Lou Timlin. I'm the Exec Member for Community Safety and Public Protection.
Hi, I'm Catrin Harding, the Exec Member for Environment and Climate Emergency.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Prue Bray. I'm the Deputy Leader. Yes, and the, I was trying to think what the right word was.
It's been a warm day.
Yes, it has been a warm day. And the Lead Member for Children's Services.
Good evening, I'm Imogen Shipper-Bay. I am the Executive Member for Finance and Governance.
Good evening, I'm David Hare. I'm the Executive Member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing.
Good evening, I'm Rachel Bishop-Firth. I'm the Executive Member for Resident Services, Inclusion and Fighting Poverty.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, everyone else. That moves us nicely on to the first formal item on the agenda, which is apologies. I know of Mark Ashwell and Martin Older. I think that accounts for everyone, so there are no more. Thank you. Now we have to approve the minutes of our last meeting. Is everybody content that I sign those as a true and accurate record of our meeting? If you could have a show of hands. That's lovely. Thank you very much. Pass that back. Thank you. Right. we now move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in any of the items on the agenda? Rachel.
Can I declare a personal interest in item 12, please? My employer works within this space. I've talked to Democratic Services and they say that as my employer isn't currently bidding on this piece of work, I can both speak and vote on it.
Great, thank you very much. And that was a helpful clarification. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, now I get the chance to make a brief statement. During the course of the recent Maiden Early and Whitegates by-election, there was some speculation that if the outcome were a Liberal Democrat victory, the consensual approach of the last 3 years would end. I want to take this opportunity to make it clear that the by-election, which did indeed produce a Lib Dem victory, will not alter the way in which the council functions. My intention is to continue to work with the other political groups, bring people together and build consensus. I'll continue to offer chairs and vice chairs on committees to the Labour and Conservative groups. I will continue to encourage a constructive and open exchange between the Council's executive and councillors of all parties on the overview and scrutiny committees, giving those committees the opportunity to influence policy development. 3 of the reports this evening evidence our focus as a council on sound and sustainable finances, without which we could do nothing to help the community that we serve. I know Imogen will be saying more on this subject later, but I should like to thank her and all my executive colleagues for having the courage to make some tough decisions in the long-term interests of our residents. If we had listened to the voices of those who put short-term popularity above long-term viability, we would be in a much weaker financial position. I wish also to thank non-executive councillors who supported these responsible but difficult decisions. But while elected members have played their part, we all know that officers across the council, at all levels of the organisation, have made an outstanding contribution. We are fortunate to have such dedicated and impressive officers, and I want to express my gratitude for their considerable efforts in ensuring that the Council's financial viability continues. The challenges ahead remain considerable. We have received a cut in our already very small core revenue support from central government this year, and we anticipate further reductions in the years to come. Demand for our services and the cost of providing them, meanwhile, continues to grow. But as an organisation, we should recognise that we're in a much stronger position than many other councils. Finally, I should like to highlight a new feature of this executive meeting, the opportunity for town and parish councils to ask questions. While none have been submitted for this meeting, I'm quite sure that town and parishes will make use of this opportunity in the future. Thank you. So we now move on to public question time. And the first question is from Paul. Paul Stevens. Good evening, Paul. Good to see you. You're with us online tonight, but it's good to see you nonetheless. Would you like to ask your question? You're still muted, Paul.
How's that?
That's it, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Good evening. My question is, why are medical facilities available at Arborfield Village Hall being left unused and undeveloped despite being paid for by the NHS?
I'll be asking David to answer this question as he's the executive member for this area.
Thank you for your question, Paul. I need to start by saying that the council doesn't own or run the village hall, nor does it commission or run the GP service. That said, I've contacted the relevant people in the NHS and they've given this answer. The space at the village hall is not currently being used, but the ICB are working with Swallowfield Medical Practice to make best use of the space at the site and are investigating different options. I've also secured a commitment from the NHS to provide regular updates on this, and if you contact me, I will supply you with the name of the individual that can supply these updates.
Thank you, David. Paul, I imagine you've got a supplementary.
Thank you. I mean, that's very useful, and I will definitely get in touch with David, and thank you very much for your answer. I do have another question, which is, we also appear to be listed in the NHS Act as having an active surgery, even though there's been no doctor at the Village Hall for, well, since the pandemic, so close to 7 years. Again, I don't suppose that's anything that you can do anything about, so I would ask, can my question be passed to an appropriate committee where I can ask the ICB direct?
Certainly, Paul, I will talk to you about the appropriate committee who that can come to, so that you can ask the ICB direct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I think we're as frustrated by this, I think, as you are, and we would like to see things move. So thank you for your question.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paul. And so we move now to our second question from Janet Hurd. Janet, when you get up there, if you press the button and the red light should come on, and then you'll be able to ask your question. All right? Yes.
You can
That's
hear
it.
me.
That's it, yes.
On June the 9th, the area identified in the local plan as being suitable to build 3,930 houses on Hall Farm, and currently where we live, qualifies for emergency text alerts from the Atomic Weapons Establishment. It is not many years since Graiseley was deemed an unsuitable site for a major development. Are Wokingham Borough Council still bent on promoting Hall Farm in their local plan?
Well, thank you for your question, Janet. And I completely understand the position of those residents living in the vicinity of Hall Farm who feel understandably upset about the prospect of development there. I completely understand that perspective. And I wish it were possible to draw up a local plan that caused no one distress. But unfortunately, it isn't possible. We have to find the sites to accommodate the government's housing allocation, and Loddon Valley Hall Farm was assessed against alternatives and judged to be the most suitable of the sites available for large-scale development. And the criteria used to assess the sites were their availability, whether they'd been promoted to us by landowners and developers, and their compliance with national and local planning policies, and finally their deliverability. Could they be delivered within the timescales set out in the local plan? And on those tests and those alone, Loddon Valley Hall Farm was the choice that the council had to make. Please be assured that the strategic development location at Loddon Valley Hall Farm is not, and I emphasise not, in the exclusion zone. In preparing the local plan, we specifically engaged with the Office for Nuclear Regulation, the Atomic Weapons Establishment and Ministry of Defence, and the West Berkshire Council, which is the lead organisation for emergency planning in the county. Now, all of these organisations raised no objections to Hall Farm, Loddon Valley Hall Farm, being in the plan, and their position of not objecting has been confirmed in statements that they have submitted to the planning inspector, who's been appointed, or planning inspectors who have been appointed to examine the local plan prior to its adoption. So there have been no objections raised to Hall Farm by all of the statutory consultees. Those same statutory consultees were the ones who objected to Graiseley. You referred to Graiseley, and Graiseley was withdrawn from the draft local plan precisely for the reasons you say. But Loddon Valley Hall Farm is not in the same situation as Graiseley. It is not in the exclusion zone. Do you have a supplementary, Janet?
Yes, yes, please. Thank you for the answer. But yes, I do have a supplementary. When circumstances change, decisions should be reviewed. And 4 things have changed since the decision to include Hall Farm in the local plan was taken. The AWE now includes homes in the Hall Farm area in its emergency text alert system, as I've said. The decision to relocate and build a new hospital beside the site will not now happen for sure for at least 10 years. Easy access to a hospital is cited as being essential for prompt treatment during an AWE emergency. 3, the new Labour government has indicated that Greenbelt land could be considered suitable for development. And 4, Wokingham Borough Policy TB04 of the Managing Development Delivery Framework has been quoted when the Wokingham Emergency Officer and his counterpart in West Berkshire advised against a proposal nearby, which is within the DEPZ, on the basis of the scale of the development. That proposal was for just 475 homes. Hall Farm is for thousands more, plus transport infrastructure, we are told vaguely during consultations, will appear at some point. Hall Farm will require significantly more contingency planning for public safety than was it anticipated when the update was considered, and it was selected on an on-balance decision, I understand. Information recently supplied to the inspector, which is online, that has just gone on in the last few days, does not even appear to commit Reading University's major project to fulfil the 5-year land supply, which is what we were led to believe was one of its advantages. In the light of this, is it now time to reassess the suitability of Hall Farm for massive concentrated development vis-à-vis the 3 alternatives of either Greenbelt to the north of our borough, dispersing development around it, or a mix of both?
Well, thank you for your supplementary. You've obviously packed a lot into that supplementary, and I must confess, I'm not going to be able to, off the top of my head, answer all of the points you've raised, but we will give you a written response to that. But let me just, if I may, at least give you a preliminary response to some of it. The first point you raised was about the text alerts. As I understand it, anyone can sign up for text alerts, whether they're within the exclusion zone or not. So the fact that text alerts are available to people outside the exclusion zone doesn't mean it's an area of particular risk or that's regarded as unsafe. You raised the point about changes in policy on Greenbelt. You're absolutely correct. The new government has loosened restrictions on development in Greenbelt. We're yet to see whether that will make a real difference to our Greenbelt, which isn't a degraded Greenbelt, it's prime agricultural land. So it's unclear at this stage, but irrespective of that change, it won't apply to this plan. This plan is being judged under the old rules. It was submitted in time to take advantage of what are called the transitional arrangements, which enable you to go under the old rules and with the old numbers. And those old numbers require us to deliver 748 new houses a year. And they require us to exclude Greenbelt land. If we went under the new rules, we'd be required, as currently things stand, to provide 1,300 houses a year. So you can see why we were keen to try and ensure we got in under the old rules rather than under the new, where we would be required to look at a whole range of sites that currently we don't think are suitable because the scale of the demands from government would be so much greater. You raised some other points, which I'm not sure I can remember them all in detail, but we'll try and provide you with a written reply that gives you the kind of detail you require. Thank you. Thank you, Janet. The next item on our agenda is parish and town council questions, and as we know, there are none this evening. And we then move on to councillor question time. This is a chance for elected members, and particularly elected opposition members, to ask a question. I don't believe there are any. No. We don't seem to have had many questions from opposition councillors for a long time. I'm not sure how to interpret that, but if they choose not to ask the questions, I think we just have to accept they don't want to ask questions. So we move on now to the main substantive report, the matters for consideration, and we start with the first of 3 finance reports, which will all be presented by Imogen. The first one is on revenue monitoring 2024-25 outturn. So this is the year-end and you report, and it's on pages 11 to 28 of your agenda. Imogen, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. These reports, all of them, are good news stories, and the summaries, they summarise the end of the year situation for 24-25 for this council. There is a general in the revenue monitoring outturn report. There is a general fund carry forward of £750,000. These are mainly projects that have been delayed or partly moved into the next financial year. The best news is that we've made good headway in the general fund balance of we now have 11.1 million, which builds a more financially stability for the council. And if you remember, this was severely depleted during COVID and the subsequent financial crisis. And as Liberal Democrats, we've been very keen to see it restored to a healthy level. And it has been many years since the reserves have been this good. We also have what is a relatively small overspend in revenue of 251,000, which is much lower than we predicted earlier this year. But we must remember that the dedicated school grant has still an overspend of 18.4 million, which is not recorded in this report. It's recorded separately, but I'm hoping Prue will want to talk about that. As usual, adult social care has a slight overspend, but it's very difficult for people to predict the needs of the people in that area exactly when planning the budget, so it's not unusual. In the chief executive area, there is an underspend due to staffing efficiencies, and the registrar's office has overachieved their income by £40,000. And this is all helping balance out the overspends elsewhere. Children's services remarkably has an underspend of £20,000, but highways has the greatest overspend, which has been partially offset by the income from planning and countryside and waste. However, while our situation is relatively good, we should not forget this is down to prudent financial management and streamlining our current services. And cutting out any waste or any other latitude that we have. We should also not forget that local councils are very low on the list when it comes to central government funding, and our council tax is still capped. Staying solvent and keeping our essential services going has always been our priority, and it has meant making a lot of compromises elsewhere. This report has it's 2 items of note and 1 to agree, and I'll let you, which I have talked about. So.
Thank you, Imogen. I think you invited Prue to come in, so I think she's going to come in.
I am. I wanted to talk about 2 things. The first one is the one that Imogen talked about in an approving way, which is that Children's Services, for the first time that I can remember, did not overspend their budget. And that's a real tribute to the hard work of officers in a really challenging environment, and they should be congratulated for that. It does not mean they've got enough money. It means that they have managed the budgets extremely well. And the second one is about the dedicated schools grant, which overspent by 18.4 million in the year. And that's 8.3 million more than was predicted when the budget was set. Now, the fact that the budget was set knowing there would be £10 million of deficit in the budget to start with tells you about the lack of funding in the SEND system, and that's where the problem is. It's special educational needs. It's just completely underfunded, and although we are not profligate with our money, we need much more in order to be able to meet the needs of our children. The funding is totally inadequate and the need is increasing. So it's not a good position. However, it's not as bad as we thought it might have been, in that partway through the year we were predicting an even higher deficit, and it's about £1 million lower than we predicted. And that again, like the Children's Services budget, I think that's the first time that we've actually come down from a mid-year projection on the DSG. This has been going on for a number of years, and it's a welcome sign that maybe some of the things we're doing have slowed the problem. It's certainly not made it go away. We cannot solve it by ourselves. We have to wait for the government to make decisions about what to do about special educational needs, and I'm not holding my breath.
Thank you, Prue. Yes, you're absolutely right to thank our officers for the enormous amount of work they've put in, both in terms of the general spend, but also in terms of the dedicated schools grant and the challenges of that running constantly in deficit because of a structural problem that the council cannot solve. It's a problem that's shared by many councils across the country. And although this is technically off our books, this deficit, the interest payment on it is not. It's having an impact on our revenue budget. So we really do need the government to do what it's promised to do, which is look at how this system can be overhauled in a way that reduces this kind of pressure, because it is a ticking time bomb that, unless it's addressed, will cause severe damage to a lot of councils in the next few years. Okay, well, although that's a slightly gloomy note on which to end, the positive thing is that the report demonstrates that we have done extremely well in the context of really difficult financial circumstances. So thank you to everyone involved. And I would like you to now support the 3 recommendations on page 11. I don't need to read them out, I think. But is everybody happy with those? Please indicate. Thank you. That's everyone. Thank you very much. And then we move on to our next finance report. And this is, as you might imagine, the other side of the picture, capital monitoring outturn 2024-25. Imogen, this is page 29, as I said, I
Yes,
think.
of course. I mean, this report shows that we have made capital savings of 5.9 million from our predicted numbers, which is a result of the cost reductions and income generation. This allows us to reuse this funding elsewhere. And a full list of the budget variances is in this report. The main element of this report is we have to agree a number of budget adjustments which we want included in the capital programme going forward. They contain some quite good projects which I shall summarise, and I'm sure others will want to talk about them more. It includes £27,997 of funding for a donation for the toilets and corridor at Robert Piggott's Infant School, a ring-fence grant of £829,000 for active travel projects, which includes the Woodley-Reading active travel route. Reading Borough Council has given us £78,928 of funding for the improvement of the A4 Sutton Seeds bus priority, which will be very welcome to any bus users in that area. It's horrible. In addition, £78,928 of ring-fence grant has been given to the council to improve disabled facilities. There is also an additional £7,800 funding for the expansion of the Wokingham Youth and Community Centre. There is a small capital spend for the improvements at Bush Walk in Wokingham. There is an additional borrowing of £347,500 from within the housing revenue account for the acquisition of 2 new properties for adult social care accommodation, and this will be paid back over time via rental incomes. And there is a veerment of £240,000 to start off the Embrook School's 6th form rebuild project. I'm sure that other exec members will want to talk about these in greater details, but in total they will add 79 million to the current capital programme, all mainly from grants, ring-fence funding, and some borrowing with a plan for payback.
Thank you very much, Imogen. I'm sure some colleagues will want to talk about some of these items you've just been drawing our attention to. David, I think you wanted to come in on the adult social care accommodation.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, this is an opportunity for the council to purchase properties to house some people with disabilities who are at threat of eviction through no fault of their own, and also increase our overall supply of specialist accommodation. And that certainly is, as we know, a priority for the council. Sorry.
Do you want to start again?
Shall I start again? Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. This was an opportunity for the council to purchase properties to house some people with disabilities who are at threat of eviction through no fault of their own, but also to increase our overall supply of specialist accommodation, which is, as you know, a priority of this council.
Thank you very much, David. You're absolutely right. It is a priority, and I think this is a great example of the way in which, in recent years, we've tried to increase the amount of working between departments and directorates in the council to try and address corporate problems by thinking corporately. So this has brought together the HRA, which is part of the housing area. It's the housing revenue account, and the adult social care team and its accommodation needs, and collectively delivered that. So that's excellent. Adrian, you wanted to also highlight something, I think.
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to highlight the background to the additional roughly £830,000 of grant funding we have, which is a combination of Active Travel Fund 5 and the Consolidated Active Travel Fund. We received the highest amount of a grant in Berkshire, which is great news, and that's because we've retained our level 2 capability for the second year running, assessed on our local leadership, our network planning and our delivery. So the hard work that's gone in the last few years is being recognised. That will allow us to slightly supplement the Woodley to Reading scheme, which will be starting build shortly, hopefully. And the balance of the money we'll be looking at shortly to go into one or more priority schemes from our cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which we signed off a couple of years ago.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, you're absolutely right. That is something we can feel very pleased about. And Prue, you want to say something?
Yes,
I imagine on the last item on that.
Yes, somewhat.
Yes.
So this is the environment of 240,000 for the Embrook School sixth form project. When I talked about this to my husband, it became clear that the word environment was not a word that's in normal usage. So just for the benefit of those who may be watching or not, all it means is borrowing money is moving it from one budget to another. We have powers under the Constitution to move money. It's the amount you can move is dictated by where you are in the organisation. I think Graham's oversight of it also matters, but it enables us to shift that money so that we can use it now to start the preparatory works for the Embrook sixth form project ahead of time, to sort of streamline the process and get going. And I hope that gives people the confidence it is really going to happen, and the main bulk of the money will be allocated next February.
And crucially, it means that the extant planning permission will remain alive because the enabling works will be undertaken. And that means we don't have to go through the complex, time-consuming process of reapplying for planning permission, which will inevitably delay the new build. So I think this is very much a good news item. Thank you very much, everyone. Could we now move to vote on this? I'm not going to read them all out, but we've got 3 substantive recommendations, and the third one breaks down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts, all of which I think are worthwhile and good news things. So could I ask you to demonstrate your support for these recommendations? And that is, again, everyone. Thank you. Right, we move to the final finance report this evening, Treasury Management Outturn 24-25. This starts on page 47, and it is again Imogen.
Thank you again, Stephen. Yes, this report, it's quite a busy report, but it outlines how the council has managed its debt and cash balances throughout the year. Our general fund debt has been reduced from 109 million to 99 million, essentially 10 million, which means the council has to pay less interest on that amount of debt. This is a much improved position from our mid-year forecast. A reduction in the capital financing requirement of the 31st of March 2025 represents an improved position to 368 million from 392 million forecast in the mid-year report. This is achieved through reducing the in-year capital spending and maintaining significant levels of debt repayment or minimum revenue provision. The only area of concern is the housing revenue account, which is a ring fence for social housing. Its borrowing has gone up to 91 million, which is where the estimate was 87 million. But there is still room within the HRA, the housing revenue account, to pay back this extra borrowing, so it's not terrible. All approved indicators set out in the Treasury Management Strategy have been adhered to, with the exception of the ratio of financing cost to the net revenue stream, HRA, which is previously highlighted in the mid-year report. The Treasury investment returns were 1.3 million over the year, which I hope you will agree is a worthwhile return. There is a lot more detail in the report, but I think that is the highlights.
Thank you very much, Imogen. That's really helpful. Are there any comments anyone wants to make or questions? No? Okay, can we move to the recommendation on page 47? 3 recommendations. Can I ask for those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone. Okay, we now move on to page 59, and this is the Asset Management Plan. And I will be presenting this report, and I commend this Asset Management Plan 2025-30 to executive colleagues. It sets out the strategic approach to the management of the Council's assets in a way that aligns with the organisation's corporate priorities and aims to secure best value for money considered in the round. The plan has been scrutinised by the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee and given a clean bill of health by councillors of all parties on that committee. And it remains only, I think, for me to thank all the officers involved in the plan's production, especially Craig Hogarth, Katie Meakin and Sarah Morgan. That's all I wish to say on it. The recommendation this time is very simple, that we adopt the Asset Management Plan. So those in favour, please shout. Thank you. We now move on to the final report, I think. Is this the final report? Yes, I think it is. The Connect to Work procurement strategy. And this starts on page 123 of your agenda. Now, this would have been presented by Mark Ashwell. Mark, unfortunately, can't be here this evening, so it falls to me to present it in his place. And I think this report can surely be regarded by everyone very positively. Government funding is enabling us to, enabling all the Berkshire Unitary Councils, not just Wokingham, to help residents who might otherwise struggle to overcome barriers to their participating in the labour market. And by overcoming those barriers, we will enable these residents to gain the benefits of working in terms of a boost to self-esteem, greater income, and a sense of independence and achievement. And those are immensely important for the individuals. And it also means that the wider economy benefits from more talent being tapped effectively. It's a theme that we're very keen to promote in this council, the idea of inclusive growth, where everyone has the opportunity to make a contribution. And this Connect to Work strategy exemplifies that very principle. And on Monday, the Berkshire Prosperity Board, on which the leaders of all the 6 unitary councils in Berkshire sit, approved the delegation to Wokingham as the accountable body to begin the procurement exercise. And I wish to thank Mark for his work on this immensely worthwhile project, and our officers also, especially Karen Yeomans and Nikki Phillips. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this? I had this kind of inkling that you might want to speak on it, given your declaration of interest earlier, Rachel.
Yes, absolutely. My employer works in this space, so very interested indeed in this. And I wanted to say a few points from the point of view of inclusion and equity, and also about how it can help us to fight poverty in Wokingham. Connect to Work aims to help people get into work and to stay employed. If you look at people with disabilities, for example, they often face additional barriers to employment, and this can lead to them living in poverty. The charity Scope estimate that disabled people are almost twice as likely to be unemployed as non-disabled people. 27% of working-age disabled people live in poverty after their housing costs are paid. Connect to Work aims to support disabled people in overcoming the additional barriers which they face in getting paid employment. People with disabilities, health conditions and other complex needs can make a huge contribution in the workplace. We see this here in the council, both in terms of our officers and some of us members. We're currently finishing off the Council's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion strategy, and this principle is a really important part of that strategy. In order to get equal access, some parts of our community will need some additional assistance, whether that's a wheelchair ramp or, as with Connect to Work, additional help to find and retain a job. This scheme goes wider than people with disabilities. It aims to help, for example, people who are carers, armed forces veterans, and people who are living in the UK under the Homes for Ukraine scheme, all of whom may face additional barriers in finding and holding down employment. And I think this is a great example of how WBC makes EDI work with practical solutions to help our residents, making investments in people's futures for the long-term benefit of them and for the borough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Before we go to the recommendation on page 123, I think we need to slightly amend it in view of the fact that we no longer need to be subject to or anticipate authorisation from the Prosperity Board, because that was given on Monday. So could I ask you to delete the word subject to and anticipating authorisation from the Prosperity Board from the recommendation, because that's now redundant. So it will read the executive approve and then the 2 bullet points underneath, which is essentially the procurement strategy and delegating authority to the Director of Place and Growth to begin the tender exercise. Following agreement from the place directors of all 6 local authorities regarding the delivery.
Just for a point of clarification for the people who may be eagerly watching this online, this is not, just to clarify, it's not a Wokingham Borough alone contract. It's a contract on behalf of all 6 unitaries, yes. And we're just the people administering it.
No, that's correct. The Berkshire Prosperity Board is formed by the 6 councils, unitary councils in Berkshire. But Wokingham Borough Council is what's described as the accountable body. It handles the finances for all of the participatory councils in the Berkshire Prosperity Board. So this authority to begin the procurement process has been delegated to us by the Berkshire Prosperity Board. And we'll be handling this process on behalf of all of the Berkshire councils. That's correct. Thank you. You're absolutely right to seek that explanation from me. Okay, can we move to the amended recommendation then? All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. And that, I think, brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everyone.